All right, guys, we're back looking at another aspect of the raid, and this time it's not all about the teams. We're going to be looking at the Sorcerer Chosens and what skills do you really need to invest in. Now, I know a lot of people want to tell you what the best Chosens are, and these are the ones you should farm, but honestly, it's very difficult because it's going to depend on your roster and what teams you're looking to create first. Now, I know there's some of these Chosens that aren't really as great as some of the others, but honestly, they all have a place in the raid. They all have a team that they belong to. So that's why we're not really looking at those today. And we're really going to get into where should you put your runes in each of these characters so that you can maximize the effectiveness of these characters and not waste all your resources. But before we jump into all of this, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that bell if you want to get notifications of other videos coming out in the future, and leave a comment below which character do you think is the best chosen and what is that fundamental skill that you have to have on them. So let's jump into it. All right, guys, so we're going to be breaking these down, and I kind of like to put these guys into 3 different categories. So the first category is going to be the chosens that you don't really have to invest too much in. They kind of are good the way they are, but we're also going to give you recommended and some optional upgrades that could help you in the long run. After that second group, we're going to be looking at the one that, well, they need a few runes put in them. Maybe a couple skills upgraded here or there, but not too much investment. And then that third group that we're looking at, well, they need a few runes put in them. Sure, you can put them on a team so you have an eligible team, but they really do need these investments in order to be a really good character on your raid team. All right. So the first one we're looking at is Queen of Hearts, and she falls in that category where she's pretty good the way she is. You really don't need any investments when it comes to the recommended skills, just level 1 on everything, which when they're a T8, that's what they're going to have. Her important skill really is the Scream. You're good to go. But if we want to look at some optional spells, the only really one to upgrade is going to be the cards. Now this one, I don't think needs to be upgraded. But if you have her on a team with Dr. F and you're really taking care of those summons, maybe you have Hades triggering a little bit more, then this one may be okay to be upgraded just so you can get it quicker and get more cards on the field. But like I said, recommendations, really you don't need much investment in her outside of unlocking her, starring her, and gearing her up so that she's available on one of your teams. All right, next up is OLAF. Same thing here, recommended, you really don't need anything with them. Olaf's there just to die multiple times in the raid until he's finally insta-killed. He's okay. Now, you can use his special Living the Dream to give tactics to some of your characters. It helps on a few different teams, but for the most part, he's just there. Looking at the upgrades, as far as optional stuff goes, his basic's fine. It's going to give you turn meter reduction, and really that just means he has a free attack every time he goes, and then Living the Dream. Now, I don't really think Living the Dream has to be upgraded, but if you put them with teams like Elsa or Herc that really care about having all of these different helpful effects, then it's worth doing. Next up is Jack. Same thing here. Jack's fine the way he is. None of his skills really get that many benefits, so I still put him in the category where you don't really need any investments in any of his skills as far as the recommendations go. When it comes to optional, it's really just as basic. It allows you to extend some of these harmful effects. So if you think about the way he works with the teams, it's putting fear out there and making sure that fear stays and gets extended throughout. So upgrading that wouldn't hurt. But again, as far as recommended and what you need, I don't think it's really needed. Now, the last one that's in this category of really doesn't need anything is Sally. Sally's one of those characters where she's really good with the EN teams, but it's really going to be dependent upon how you build your EN team. So the ones that are using Maleficent and things like that, that aren't really looking for the fear mechanic, you don't need any upgrades. She's going to do her thing. She can throw out blinds. She can add those continuous damages. That's really all she needs. The difference here, the reason why you have some optionals, is really going to be based on that fear mechanic. So if she's on one of those teams that's utilizing OOGIE, so if you guys haven't seen Patrick's 4 million damage EN team, well, she really needs her basic upgraded. That way you're getting more of these continuous damages. The other one is the free-to-play team that Gaza did a video on where you're utilizing Chunk for fear and then you're copying your Sally. That's where this level 4 basic is going to really matter. So if you have a fear mechanic that you're using with her in raids, definitely upgrade that basic at least to level 2, but level 4 is really, really good in order to get those extra attacks in. But outside of that, she's pretty good the way she is. And now we kind of transition into the next group. And really the next group just means recommendations are going to have some runes that you need. And the good thing about OOGIE is you really only need one skill upgraded, and that's going to be his Frightful Shadow. You really want to make sure that this skill is upgraded so you can get silence on all the different enemies. That's really needed against Tornado and the Ice Titan when you're wanting to clear out those summons. So really, this is the only skill that needs an upgrade. There are some other skills that you can kind of put some runes into, but honestly, recommendation and optional, that's the only skill you need to invest in. Just put it to level 2 and you're good to go. So now that we've got an OOGIE out of the way, we're actually getting into some of the characters where you're going to need to put a little bit of investment when it comes to your runes. Horn King is the next on that list. Now Horn King, we really look at as basic. When it comes to recommendations, you want to make sure that you get that pot out on the team so he's doing extra damage, and that's why you want to make sure his basic is upgraded. Realistically, you're just using his basic every time once the pot comes down, and he can get some really good damage. Now, when it comes to the optional upgrades, this is where you want to make sure that cauldron that you're putting out is getting a little bit better. So you want to get the upgrades to make this cauldron have more life, you to do more damage while the cauldron's out. And that's where you're going to start to invest in the Rise of the Cauldron board as well as the Black Cauldron. Those two skills are really going to pump him up to do a lot more damage. So just make sure when you're using him on your team, you're focusing in on that basic, and he does very well, especially with those Beast and Bell teams, just to get the extra calls and be able to do all that damage that you want him to do. Now, I'm not getting into a lot of the T9 characters here, but Horn King is definitely one of those characters that's worth going to T9, getting the extra damage again on that basic skill. I haven't really included T9 in here because I do feel like there's a lot more mythicals that are worth the T9 before he is. You have characters like Herc and Zeus that are just going to be way better investments than Horn King. But if you're to that 4th or 5th mythical and you're looking to do another upgrade, he's definitely pretty good to put on the list for the extra damage specifically in raids. So next up is really the category where we're going to have the heavy investments. So we saw some runes that were needed for Horn King and OOGIE, but now in this category, we're going to have to start to step it up a little bit more. We're going to start to see some of those higher priced skills, more investment in these characters, but you're going to get a lot more out of them. Frozone's the first of this category, and you can see we're not necessarily needing that many gammas when we're in here, but you're going to need a few more runes than you did before. Now, when it comes to Frozone, you're wanting to get that basic and that special up, those 2 levels. The reason why we're wanting to upgrade these is with that basic, we're going to be able to extend that slow. The cooler than cold, we're going to be able to reduce that turn meter. And then with the ice block, this is where we're going to start adding the crit power and the crit chance. So this is really where we want to do the basic upgrades to make sure that we're unlocking those extra pieces to each of these skills to make Frozone the beast that everybody sees inside of a raid. And then to take Frozone to that next level, we're going to do a few more upgrades on those 3 skills, which are going to start to really add the extra damage. A lot of Frozone's abilities do extra damage to raid bosses once you get this up and leveled, and that's what all these upgrades are going to do. They're just going to increase the damage and really make him the character that you want him to be. Whether you're using with Moana and making sure the Frozen's out, you're playing around with the dash team and adding the big bombs when you're doing your stasis on them. And this is really where you're going to be able to let Frozone shine in the raids on any team that you put him on. So next we have Mike. And I know not everybody has Mike. He's definitely one of those characters a little bit harder to get, but eventually Mike is going to be a really, really good add to the Sully team when it comes to the raids. Now, as you can see, he needs a lot of skills. It's not just 1 or 2. It's pretty much almost all of his skills. And they all add just a little bit more, whether it's extra offense, it has to do with adding fear or doing more damage when the Titans have fear. But really, these are the bare minimums that you need to do for Mike in order to really make him good in the raid and really accelerate what Sully's trying to do. One of the really important ones here is don't let the kids touch you. Now that skill really needs to be level 4 because it's going to reduce magic. It's really going to get the power behind the skill and allow you to do what you need to do in the raid with Sully. And if we're looking at the optional, realistically, all we're going to be doing is upping that leadership. Adding a little bit more offense is going to make a big difference when you're trying to hit those big skills. But honestly, just like with all these others, optional is just what you're going to be slowly doing over time. And I think that Mike is definitely going to be one of those that you kind of have until you really get that full team set up for the Mike and Sully combo. Lastly, we have Merlin. And Merlin has one of the heavier investments out of any of the characters. Merlin's really good in the raid because he can fit into a lot of different teams just based on the style of how you use him on each of those teams. One of his skills that's very important is his basic. Now, taking that basic up to level 4 allows him to do sleep on his basic attack. So now when you're fighting any of the summoning titans, like the Ice Titan or the Tornado Titan, he can kill those summons just with his basic, which is great. Now, if you happen to have him on a team on one of the other titans, you may not have to invest in that one. But if you're in one of the lower raids, maybe not heroic yet, he's going to be really good to have that because you're going to be using him on a daily basis against different titans, and it gives him a variety. When you're in heroic, if you know for a fact he's not going against one of those summoning titans, you may not need the investment. But honestly, I think it's just a good investment in general. The second one is use your head. And I think use your head, you really want to get it to level 3. That way you have the extra magic that it's giving. Whether you keep scrolling Merlin, and with this upgrade at level 3, he can do this every single turn, or if you're passing that magic along. Because remember, he can give that magic over to Ian, he can give that magic over to Elsa, to Herc, any of these characters to instantly get their skills back. And that's what I found to be some of the fun ways of using Merlin outside of just scrolling himself every single turn. Lastly, his other 2 skills, again, we're just adding a little bit more, and usually those are going to be doing things with turn meter. So ready or not, we are reducing turn meter on the Titan. Again, there is a potency check, so it doesn't work every time, but it is nice when it does work. And then Brains of Abroad is going to be helping you get your skills up faster and faster, whatever you're using within that team. So when we look at optimal, same thing here, just a couple little upgrades here and there, especially with Brains of Abroad in order to get those spells recharged even faster. So just a few upgrades here. But honestly, if there's any of these tunes that I'm taking to T9, it's going to be Merlin. I don't really have it added in here, but Merlin is the T9 that I have, and that's because of Ready or Not. So once you get them to T9, you can take that Ready or Not up one more skill, and that's actually going to reduce magic of all the spells on a Titan. So this only works when they're not empowered, but imagine taking away that one skill right before they're going to do their insta-kill. It really, really helps. And it buys you time in all of the different Titans in order to set up the rest of what you're doing with your team. So out of all of these Sorcerer Chosens, Merlin's the first one I would take to T9. And honestly, after that, it would probably be Horn King just for that extra damage. So these are the upgrades I would do on each of these characters. I think a few of these, like you saw with recommended and optional, I think you can stick with recommended on most of these. If you're wanting to invest a little bit more because some of these teams with these Chosens are very good, you can go the optimal route, put some more runes in here. But again, I would always be focusing on your damage dealers first with all these raid teams. So with these teams, it's all about getting those skills up to the levels that you need for each of your teams, and make sure you're focusing in on the few that you can make full teams with. There's no reason to go after all of the Chosens if you don't have full teams to make with them, but I hope this is going to help you understand which skills are important and which ones aren't. So when it comes to these Chosens, I want to make sure that you're able to use your resources exactly how you need to, and you're not having to waste any of your runes when you're bringing these guys up. I appreciate you guys watching the video, and make sure, let me know, what do you want to see next? Is it more of these raid teams? Do you want breakdowns of specific characters, maybe other modes? Just let me know. We'll put a video out for you.